the questions that I want to ask a little bit more about who you are is how many of you have children birth to 3? Wow. How about 4 to 6? How about 7 to 12? And teenagers? Where are all the parents of teenagers? And how many of you have all of those ages? Or more than one? More than 2? Okay. Well, I hope that you will go away from here learning several tools that might be help you to have more joy in parenting. And I want to share that positive discipline is based on the work of Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikurs. And these were men way before their time because they have always believed that everyone is deserving of dignity and respect, including children. And so they taught us a lot about Gemeinschaftsgefühl. And Gemeinschaftsgefühl is a word in German that is not easy to translate into English because it means so much, but it's a sense of community, of contribution, and a real concern for one's fellow man and one's community. And that they really believe that that is the measure of mental health, and that is what we should help all of our children to develop. So I just have a question. How many of you just love being a parent most of the time? Okay, now for honesty, how come many of you sometimes don't like it at all? Well, you're certainly not alone. One of the things that I like to start out with is just really making it clear that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. Wouldn't you think that after all these children and grandchildren and books that I ought to be perfect by now? Well, I want you to know that I'm not. In fact, my youngest daughter now does positive discipline with me. We sometimes do lectures together. And when I come to the part about talking about positive discipline, there's no punishment, no blame, no shame, no pain. And Mary pops up and says, "Mama, were you doing positive discipline when I was 8 years old?" And I said, "Sure, I started before you were born. You were one of my after children. I had my before, during, and after children." And she says, "Well, do you remember that time that you chased me around the house with a belt?" That's what I was. "No, I didn't." She said, "Yes, you did, Mom. I remember jumping over the couch." And I said, "Well, did I catch you?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, you must have really provoked me." So and is there anyone out there who never gets provoked? And it's like, I'm so glad that as we talk about later that mistakes are wonderful opportunities to learn because I'm still making them. And I love this cartoon where Calvin says, "Here, Dad, I'd like you to read this form and have it notarized." And so Dad reads, "I, the undersigned Dad, attest that I have never parented before. And insofar as I have no experience in the job, I am liable for my mistakes, and I agree to pay for any counseling in perpetuity that Calvin may require as a result of my parental ineptitude." And then you see Calvin sitting off in timeout saying, "I don't see how you're allowed to have a kid without signing one." And of course, the reason that's so funny is because it's so true. Seriously, we all know that parenting is the most important job in the world. And yet, what is that we have the least education for? Now, of course, we can't say that about you because you're here tonight, but we know that we need education to be a brain surgeon or to be a bricklayer. And yet, so many parents say, "Oh, well, nobody's going to tell me how to parent." And this is not about telling you how to parent. Have you noticed that there are a lot of experts out there who say different things? And so what I like to do is encourage you to get as much education as you can. But take everything through your own heart, your own wisdom, and apply what makes sense to you. But one of the things we like to do in all of our classes and workshops, we like to start out by creating a roadmap of what it is that you really want for your children. And I'd like you all to imagine that your children are grown and they come back for dinner after they're as adults. What kind of a person do you hope is sitting across the table with you? And I do want to back up for just a minute and say that when we talk with teachers, it's the same thing. Suppose these kids are coming back for a visit, because whether we're applying these principles in the homes or the classroom, they're same. They just look a little different situations. So what we start with is asking parents or teachers to list what are the challenges that they're having with children. And then we have them list what are the future characteristics that you want for your children. And what's interesting is that the lists look the same. It doesn't matter where we go or what country we're in. See if this doesn't fit for you. Challenges: won't listen, backtalk, lack of motivation, foul language, interrupting, homework. I'm not going to read them all, you can read them. But there's just a lot of challenges that we all go through. And yet I also want you to look at this list of characteristics and life skills and see if you agree that you want your children to have self-discipline, responsibility, accountability, self-confidence, and courage. Again, I'm not going to read them all to you. But how many of you would agree that this is what you want for your children? What is on that list of characteristics and life skills? Well, I have real exciting news for you. You can use the challenges to teach the valuable social life skills that you want. So from now on, whenever your kids are challenged, you can say, oh, isn't this exciting? My child is misbehaving, so now I can bring out one of my skills and teach what I want, hope this child will learn. So let's start with the challenge of not listening. First of all, how many of you could claim that your child doesn't listen? Okay, so the thing is, when parents tell me that, I have to say, what do you really mean by they won't listen? What you really mean is that they won't obey. And the other thing is, I often to say is, if your child is not listening, maybe you're not giving them an example of what listening is all about. But I'm not going to talk about you for a minute. I'm going to talk about your neighbors. Do you know that your neighbors talk a lot? They tell. They tell kids what happened. They tell them what caused it to happen. They tell them how they should feel about it. They tell them what they should do about it. Going on, in fact, this is what they look like. Does that look familiar? And if they were paying attention, they would notice what their kids are doing. It just goes in one ear and out the other. In fact, we complain about this, but we don't take responsibility for why that's happening. And what we need to do is, instead of trying to stuff in, we need to learn to draw forth. The root of education is educare, which means to draw forth. And see, too often we're trying to stuff in and wonder why it goes in one ear and out the other. So one of the first tools I'm going to teach you about is asking curiosity questions. And there are two levels of curiosity questions. The first ones I'm going to talk to you about are conversational. And those are questions like, what were you trying to accomplish? And how do you feel about what happened? And then what happened? And what did you learn from it? And what ideas do you have to take care of that problem now? But I want to warn you about something. If you're not curious about the child's answer, don't ask. It's called curiosity questions. And tone of voice is very important. You don't say, okay, what happened? What are you going to do about this? You have to really be curious. And I would like to give you an example. Excuse me. My daughter, Mary, my youngest, came home to me one day. She was in the 8th grade. And she said, Mama, I decided to get drunk at the 8th grade graduation party. Now, isn't that exciting? And don't you all hope that you have that kind of relationship where your kids tell you these exciting things? And I just said, this is one of those times when I kept it together and I said, tell me more about that. And she said, well, a lot of the kids are doing it. It looks like they're having fun. And I said, well, what do your friends say about you now because you don't drink? And she thought about it. And one of the ways you know that you're asking curiosity questions is you can see your kids think. And she's thought about it. She said, they're always telling me that they admire me. And I said, well, what do you think that they'll think after you get drunk? And again, she thought about it. She said, they'll probably be disappointed in me. And I said, and how do you think you'll feel about yourself? again, she thought about it. She says, no, I'll probably feel like a loser. And then she came to the conclusion, she says, I don't think I will. Now, don't you think I should have left well enough alone? But I didn't, and this is why I always want my children to be thinking for themselves, to thinking of the consequences of their choices. Not that I want to impose consequences on them, which is usually just a way of disguising punishment. I want them to explore the consequences of their choices and to think about what it's like in their life. And I just said to her, I do know that if you ever do decide that you will try anything like that you will think it through and what it means for your life and what are the consequences in your life. And you can always call me and you can always talk to me. So, one more. I just think it is such an important tool. One of my sons, I have 5 boys and 2 girls. One of my sons, I think it was like the 11th grade, decided that school was irrelevant. And sometimes it is, but especially Mark was very bright math. He was 98th percentile, and he could see answers to math and questions sometimes without doing the busy work, but he would get penalized if he wasn't doing the busy work. So anyway, he was at that rebellious stage, which is very normal for teenagers. And I forgot about positive discipline for a long time. And I would lecture and I would try to control and I would try and get him up, and it was awful. And so one day I decided, wait a minute, why don't I try practicing when I preach? So I sat down with him and I said, Mark, you don't have to go to school. You're at an age now where you can drop out. And if you do, you'll need to get a job and pay rent. But I'm just curious, what do you think would happen to you if you drop out of school and you don't get an education? He said, well, there's lots of millionaires that didn't get an education. I said, that's true, I've heard of that. I said, do you know any of those people? And he said, no. And I said, well, who do you know that has dropped out of school? And he thought, he said, well, there's Jeff, who's working at McDonald's, and Scott, who's in jail. And I said, well, what kind of jobs do you think you'll be able to get without an education? He said, well, I could be a contractor. I said, yes, that's a very honorable job. I said, what kind of jobs would you not be able to get? I said, well, I probably couldn't be an engineer, and I probably couldn't be a pilot. And again, the old wheels turning, and pretty soon he says, okay, I'm going to go, but I'm not going to like it. And I just had to say, Mark, that's really profound thinking. It's like, you're going to go because you're thinking of what the future, it will mean to you in your future. So, learning to ask instead of tell is huge to help your kids explore what their life is all about and what they need to do. But one of the things that I'm going to suggest is that I'll tell that later. Okay, but first now I want to tell you about simple curiosity questions. And to do this, I need 3 volunteers. One of the things, and while 3 people are coming up here really quickly, one of the things we do in the parenting classes is we do experiential activities because we have found that people learn so much more when they get into the child's world through these experiential activities. So I just want to demonstrate one of them. Okay, so come over here. I need one of you to be the child. Which one wants to be the child? Okay. So if you'll grab the microphone right there. Now, I want you to come and stand over here. You're going to stand there. And you'll be there. And so what you're going to do is you're going to be the telling parent, and you're going to be the asking parent. And what you'll do is you'll go over and you'll hold the microphone. It's going to train us where we can stand. What you're going to do is you're going to hold the microphone in front of him and just listen to what he says and notice what you're thinking, doing, and deciding. Then you'll come over and listen to what she says and hold the microphone so everybody can hear her and notice what you're thinking, doing, and deciding. Okay? So go ahead. Just start with
one at a time.
One at a time. Back and forth.
Go brush your teeth.
Okay.
What do you need to do so your teeth won't feel squeezy?
Don't forget your coat.
What are you taking so you won't get cold outside?
Go Bed.
What is next in your bedtime routine chart?
Do your homework.
What is your plan for doing your homework?
Stop fighting with your brother.
How can you and your brother solve this problem?
Put the dishes in the dishwasher.
What did we decide to do with our dishes when we finish eating?
Hurry up and get dressed, you'll miss the bus.
What is your plan for catching the bus on time?
Stop whining.
What words can you use so I can hear you?
Pick up your toys.
What is your responsibility when you're finished playing with your toys?
Okay, that's good. Now, just stay here a bit. So, when you go over to this parent, what are you thinking, feeling, and deciding?
No. Pretty simple.
That's pretty simple, okay. Now, what you're thinking and feeling and deciding when you go to this parent?
Well, with this parent, I actually feel like, oh, she wants to talk to me. She wants to interact with me. It's not about, go do this. It's, okay, how do we do this? How do we do what we need to do? Where I felt more drawn to this parent and more not wanting this parent.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If you look at this list here, are you learning any of these skills and characteristics from parent A? The one who told you what to do. No.
Not really. No. Not one.
Can you find anything on there that you're learning from this parent who's asking you questions?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. Desire to cooperate and communicate or contribute, communication and problem solving, healthy self-esteem.
Okay, so I think we want some. Let's give them a hand. Now, isn't that interesting how such a simple little tool makes such a big difference? And I also want to share with you that it's physiology. How many of you have ever noticed that when someone tells you to do something, what happens in your body? You just get kind of stiff, and the message that goes to the brain is resist. On the other hand, when somebody asks you a question respectfully, as though they really want to know what you think, what happens? Your body relaxes. The message that goes to the brain is search for an answer. And so if you don't do any other tool, it can make a huge difference. But for a whole month, don't ask questions. Just start noticing how often you tell. And every time you tell, put $1 in a jar. And you could probably all go to Hawaii in a month. But the other thing is that you can start thinking, well, how could I have asked that as a question that would invite my child to think? And to be more willing to cooperate. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that there's never one tool that works with every child every time. That's why in positive discipline we like to share many, many tools. But they are all designed to help children learn these valuable and social and life skills that we want for them. So everybody should have a list like this and keep it handy so you can celebrate misbehavior so that it gives you an opportunity to teach these characteristics and life skills. So as I said a little earlier, positive discipline is never humiliating, no blame, no shame, no pain. Because punishment invites compliance or rebellion, not change. So before it got a little overwhelming, I used to answer questions on the internet. And so often people would say, I have tried everything. And can you just guess some of the things they had tried? Here's what they said: yelling, lectures, scolding, spanking, slapping hands, grounding, timeout, detention, withdrawal of privileges, rewards, bribes. I've told you 1,000 times. I love that one. If you've ever told a child even 100 times, who is the dummy? You know, it is so interesting how as adults we do what doesn't work. We do it harder, we do it louder, we do it more often. Children are a little smarter. They might keep trying to get a result for a little while, but eventually they'll give it up if it doesn't work. So I also love this one, and I think this is so typical, that parents will often bawl them out and then bail them out. And I want to show you what that looks like. Just suppose your child comes home and has lost his baseball net. If you're like your neighbors, you would say, oh, well, why don't you be more responsible? If you take care of it, you wouldn't lose it. And I'll tell you something, I'm not going to buy you another because maybe that'll teach you. If you just have to go out because I'm telling you, you're so irresponsible, I'm just so sick and tired, blah, 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 blah. And if they were looking at their child is gone. They're looking at them, and you know why they're looking at them? Because we've said, you look at me when I'm talking to you, so they're okay. They're looking, but if you look into their eyes, they're gone. So pretty soon, the parent will say, about 5 minutes later, they're driving to the store to buy another mint. But they're still going with the mouth. Okay, I'm going to buy another one this time, but it's the last time, because if you can't learn to be responsible, then you're going to, and I'm sick and tired. How many times do I tell you, just this time you better listen, because I will not take you and buy another one if you lose this one. Liar, liar, it's on fire. And this is what children have learned, that they can listen to the lecture, they don't have to be responsible, and pretty soon they will be rescued. Now, what would a positive discipline parent do? The child comes home and says, I lost my baseball mitt. Positive discipline parent, oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I mean, the hardest thing for parents to do is to just shut up. But and so what will the child do? Well, aren't you going to buy me another one? No, honey, I'm sorry. But I'll miss the game. Oh, that's really too bad. I mean, you've got to be careful that you're not sarcastic. but you know what will happen? That child will probably find his baseball mitt. Or if he doesn't, he'll borrow one. He'll figure something out. And, you know, you could say, well, you I have faith in you to figure out how to handle this. But this child will learn to experience the consequences of their choices in a supportive environment. And I just want to say something again about logical consequences. I used to teach about logical consequences, and which is one of the most popular discipline methods today. But what it usually looks like from parents and teachers is poorly disguised punishment in the name of logical consequences. And I think that children should experience the consequences of their choices in a supportive environment through what happened, what do you think caused it to happen, what could you learn from this, but that we do not need to impose consequences on them. Instead, we just get them to focus on solutions. How could you handle this problem? So the reason there's no punishment is because the 3 R's of punishment, usually long-term, is rebellion. They can't make me, I'll do what I want. Or revenge, I'll get even. I'll hurt back, even if it hurts my future. Now, I want to talk about this one for a minute, because one of the things I've noticed is that there are a lot of children today who think that their grades are more important to them, to their parents, than they are. Now, that hurts. And so what do? They get even if it hurts them in the future. Which, by the way, I think this is one of the reasons that kids are not interested in learning, is because grades have become so ridiculously important. Even parents, they're not interested in as much. I know we don't mean to, but we don't think about, well, gee, what did you learn? And how do you like that? And what's it mean to you? And what could you do to make that more enjoyable and more meaningful to you? It's all about grades. Do your homework, get good grades. Or retreat into low self-esteem. I must be a bad person. Or where they are sneaky, I just won't get caught next time. So it's not that punishment doesn't work if all you want is to stop the behavior right now. But we have to look at what are the long-term results of punishment. And Chaim Ganat said this about spanking. When a child hits a child, we call it aggression. When a child hits an adult, we call it hostility. When an adult hits an adult, we call it assault. When an adult hits a child, we call it discipline. Does not make sense at all. And where did we ever get the crazy idea that in order to make children do better, first we have to make them feel worse? I want you to just really let that sink in. Where did we ever get the crazy idea that in order to make children do better, first we have to make them feel worse? It doesn't really make sense, does it? In fact, think of a time when somebody put you down, humiliated you, made you feel really bad. Is that when you're thinking, oh, gee, thanks, this is so helpful? I just feel so encouraged, and I can just hardly wait to bring all my problems to you because I find it so helpful. And so we wonder why this is what discipline or punishment is based on, this idea that if I make you feel bad, that's going to inspire you to do better. But the truth is that children do better when they feel better. Now, I do not mean the kind of feel better where they're pampered and given everything they want. Again, I'm talking about brain science, and there's been brain science for so many years that children cannot learn in a state of upset and stress. They can only learn when they're feeling better. And so it's very important that so often people think, well, if you're not going to punish, does that mean you're going to let kids do whatever they want? And that is not positive discipline. It does not include permissiveness. Permissiveness teaches children that love means getting others to take care of me, or that I'm not capable and I can't survive disappointment. I think that so many parents, in the name of love, do not realize how they're robbing their children of developing the belief in their own capability by trying to do too much for them. So we really need to avoid pampering. And to give you an example, I would like to tell the story of the little boy and the butterfly. And there was this little boy who was watching the butterfly try to break out of the chrysalis. And he just was so fascinated, but then he started to become concerned because the butterfly was just struggling so much and he felt sorry for it. So he decided he would help. So he broke open the chrysalis and was just delighted as he watched that butterfly fly off into the sky. But then he watched in horror as it fell to the ground and died. And what happened? The butterfly did not develop its muscles, its strengths for survival. And too often we do this with our children because we don't want them to suffer. We need to allow our children to suffer. We should not make them suffer, but we need to allow them to suffer in a supportive environment. Oh, I'm so sorry you can't have that toy you want. I can see how disappointed you are. But we do not need to talk them out of their feelings, and we do not need to rescue them and give them everything they want. We want to help them develop the perception that I am capable. So we have heard all the no-nos of positive discipline: no punishment, no permissiveness, no rewards, no praise, no pampering or rescuing, no punitive timeout or grounding. And I remember the last class I taught, I was teaching the parents that these are all the no-nos, and I just looked at them and I said, you guys look like deer in headlight. It's like, well, what else is there? And the good news is that there are a lot of what else's in positive discipline. In fact, we even have a whole deck of cards now that have 52 alternatives to punishment that can be really fun because we're always focusing on solutions with kids. What would be the solution to that? And sometimes when you have these cards, or it's even an iPhone app, you can just pick a card or shake and see what card comes up. And then the kids can shake and see, and then you can say, which one of these do you think will work for us? And this is one of the biggest tools that we use in positive discipline, is getting kids involved in focusing on solutions. So and I want to share with you the 5 criteria for positive discipline, and all of the parenting tools we talk about meet these 5 criteria. First of all, is it respectful? Is it both kind and firm at the same time? Does it help children feel that sense of belonging and significance? And belonging and significance is the primary goal of all children, all people actually. And when they don't feel that belonging and significance, that is when they feel discouraged and they misbehave. Is it effective long term? And I've already stated that punishment will stop the behavior right now, but what are the long-term results? Does it teach valuable social and life skills for good character? And does it invite children to discover how capable they are and to use their power constructively? I think it is so exciting that discipline, positive discipline, can meet all of these criteria. So another cartoon, talking about kind and firm. Here is a mother and child in an argument where she says no, and he says yes, and she says no, and he says yes. Then she remembers to be both kind and gives him a hug and says no. And he says, okay. And then he says, a hugging no isn't fair. Well, a hugging no may not be fair, but it can be very effective. And that is such a beautiful way of really sharing that you can be kind and firm at the same time. Kindness shows respect for the child. Firmness shows respect for the needs of the situation and puts it together. I need to make a comment here. How many of you have noticed that there seem to be a lot of children being raised today with an entitlement mentality? To me, it's one of my biggest concerns because I see, we go from these extremes, either or. And I think that too many parents who are giving up punishment have gone to permissiveness. And they are raising children who think the world owes me a living. And one of my concerns is that a lot of people who don't want punishment are drawn to positive discipline, but they don't get the firm part. And it is so important to be both kind and firm at the same time because children do need our guidance. They do need some limits, and the more they're involved in creating them, the better. But there are times when they just need these limits because being too kind is permissive and too firm is authoritarian. Oh, wait a minute, I want to tell you something about this though. First of all, are y'all aware, you've all heard that opposites attract, right? Well, there's one difference that doesn't show up until after the children arrive, and it is this. There is usually one spouse who is just a little bit lenient, and another who is just a little bit strict. But what happens is this lenient person feels like he or she has to be more lenient to make up for this mean old strict person. And the strict person feels like he or she has to be more strict to make up for this wishy-washy lenient person. So they get further and further apart, and then they fight about who's right and who's wrong. And the truth is they're both not being very effective. And if they could learn from each other and say, hey, why don't we combine our talents and learn to be both kind and firm at the same time. Also, I think that it would be a really good idea if parents would make an agreement with each other that when I lose it, it's okay for you to step in and I won't feel like you're taking over because we've agreed in advance, and vice versa. And if you have that agreement, I mean, I just loved it with when I would just be so ready to chase somebody with a belt. And my husband would say, it's okay, honey, why don't you just go take some time out. He wouldn't say it that way, he says, it's okay, I'll handle it. But if that works if you've made the agreement in advance. But I want to just give you some examples of kind and firm. You validate feelings. I know you don't want to stop playing, and it's time for bed. Show understanding. I know you'd rather watch TV than do your homework, and homework needs to be done now. Redirection. You don't want to brush your teeth, and we'll do it together. Advanced agreement. I know you don't want to mow the lawn, and what was our agreement? And then kindly wait for an answer. Provide a choice. You don't want to go to bed, and it is time. Do you want to one story or two stories as soon as your jammies are on? A choice, and then follow through by deciding what you'll do. I know you want to keep playing video games, and your time is up. You can turn it off now, or I will put it in the closet. Kind and firm. Of course, I think a big thing that's very important is that we need to be teaching kids the skills of self-discipline. and self-reliance and contribution all along. But again, I want to go back to the primary goal of all children is belonging and significance. And this is why it's very important to make a connection before correction. Again, it's the brain science. It's like children do better when they are calm and feel good and not when they're upset and stressed. And Rikers said that children need encouragement like a plant needs water. And this is one of the reasons we need to not do things for children that they can do for themselves. But I have news for you. I want to tell you some more about your neighbors. Do you know that many of your neighbors are dressing their children for school when they are 3, 4, 5, and even 6 and 7 years old? Now, why do you think that they are still dressing these children who can really dress themselves well by themselves if they've taken time for training? Why are their parents dressing them? It's faster and they look better, right? So what you need to do is go home and tell your neighbors that in the name of looking good for others and expediency, they are robbing their children of the opportunity to believe in their own capability. So what they need to do is take time for training, buy the kind of clothes that are easy to pull on and pull over, and they might mismatch. They might not look as great, but it's more important that they feel capable. I want to tell you one story about that. When Mark, from my first after child, who was going to an excellent preschool, I had trained the staff, so they were doing a great job. And one of the things, I have to back up and tell you something else first. If any of you has a perfect child, a child who never rebels or tests, you need to go to a therapist quickly. Because it is normal. It's called individuation. Children are always testing, who am I separate from my parents? What kind of power do I have in this world? How can I use it? And they are testing. And so what we need to use kind and firm ways to guide them along with the testing. I also have some good news for you. How many of you have people tell you how well your children have behaved when they're out of your home? And you do, what? my kid. That is a sign of really good parenting. Because your kids can test in home where they're safe and they can just drive you nuts. But they're learning so that when they go out into the world, they are being the polite kind of children that you hope for them. So back to with Mark. He, by the time he was 2.5, would dress himself. He could just pull on his little shirt and pull off his little pants, and he would feel so proud of himself, and he would come out and do something to help pour the cereal or the milk, or even on weekends scramble the eggs. But I could see the day that he decided to test, because it was time for I'm glad it was his father's turn to take him, because he was stark naked, and he wasn't getting dressed, and we had decided in advance. We said, if ever you're not dressed, you can just take your clothes in a paper bag and get dressed on the way to school. This was before seat belts. This is a true story. So his dad, when it's time to go to school, takes him under one arm, stark naked, his bag of clothes in the other, marches out into the rain, just as the neighbor from across the street. They were looking at what? And Mark cries most of the way to school. I'm so cold. And his father says, well, you can get dressed if you want. So, but no, he was testing. So he gets to school, he's stark naked, takes him into school, and Joyce, the director, says, oh, hi, Mark, I see you didn't get dressed this morning. and she just says, here, take your clothes into my office and come out as soon as you're dressed. No big deal. And I will tell you that I don't think that Mark tested again for several months, and this time he was in his jammies and the same thing. He went to school, he went and got dressed after he got there. One mother shared with me that the way she did this, she had a 5-year-old who didn't want to get dressed, and she said, because they were, by then had seat belts, she says, okay, well, we'll just take your clothes. And when we get to the school, I will pull up into the driveway where it will be safe, and I will go in where I can see you, but you can just stay in the car and come in as soon as you're dressed. And so the child did that, got very bored with staying out there when there was nobody to listen, got dressed and came in. So one of the things that we need to know is that children are always making decisions from the time they're born, even in a pre-verbal sense. They are making decisions. Who are they? Am I good? Am I bad? Am I capable or am I not capable? What is the world like? Is it safe, threatening, friendly, or unfriendly? And what do I need to do to survive or to thrive based on the above decisions? And because this is so important, this is why we do so many experiential activities in our classes and workshops, is to get into the child's world and really understand, what are they thinking, what are they feeling, what are they deciding? And we have these mistaken goals because what Dreiker's found is that when children don't believe they belong, they often choose a mistaken way to find belonging and significance. For example, this hat is for undue attention, and this is the child who says, I belong when you pay constant attention to me. And this is the hat for misguided power. I belong when I'm the boss, or at least I don't let you boss me. And this is the one for revenge. I don't belong, and that hurts, so I'll hurt you back. And for assumed inadequacy, I don't believe, leave me alone. And one of the things that we have, the hidden message is what the child is really saying is, this child is saying, don't give up on me, show me a small step. This one is saying, notice me, involve me usefully. This one says, I'm hurting, validate my feelings. And this one says, let me help, give me a choice. Now, this is called the mistaken goal chart, and it's so important that I hope you'll all attend a class and learn a whole lot more about it, because understanding why children misbehave because of their belief, their mistaken belief about how to belong, and then how to feel them, encourage them is so important. And I want to share this story. This was sent to me by a certified positive discipline trainer who said that this is her grandson who had combed his own hair. And she said, just look how he just looks so pleased with himself. And she said, what made me feel badly about that is that when my children combed their hair and it looked like that, I redid it for them to make sure they looked good for other people. Of course, today that style would be right in, But the point is that she said, I'm sorry it took me so long to learn. It is more important for my child to feel capable than to look perfect. Now, I'm going to show you a video that it's actually on YouTube. It won one of the funniest home videos. But I want you to just make a guess about what this child might be believing. Some people feel sorry for that little guy. I don't feel sorry for him, he's so clever. that one of the things you could do is ignore it, which is one thing you can do for a temper tantrum, because if you do ignore it, it will eventually will go away. But there are other things you can do, and I'd just like to share a couple. One is to validate a child's feelings. And Aisha Pope has given me permission to share this story. She said that she had heard about just validating feelings for a temper tantrum. And her little guy was having a temper tantrum right in the middle of Toys R Us, sitting there on the cement floor. One of those times when you would like to walk down the other aisle, but she said instead she sat down on the floor with him and just looked at him and said, "You're so mad, you're really angry, you're so upset." And pretty soon he just crawled into her lap and he was done. And just think about that. Don't you love to have your feelings just plain validated without people giving you an advice or telling you shouldn't feel that way? We need to learn to let our children have their feelings and have faith in them that they can work it through. Because in that process of working it through, they're learning. I can survive the upsets of life. I can develop my disappointment muscles. I can learn delayed gratification. I can feel capable, even though I don't at the moment. That's what they learn. Now, another example is I love hugs, giving a hug, or asking for a hug. And I want to tell you this story about Bob Bradbury is an Adlerian who studied with Drykers. And one of the things that Adlerians used to do is open forum counseling, where they would interview a family in front of a large audience. And this one father had a 4-year-old who was having temper tantrums. And so after Bob Bradbury had heard the story, he said, "I have a suggestion. The next time your son has a temper tantrum, would you ask him for a hug? Tell him you need a hug." And the father was very dubious. He says, "Well, doesn't that just reward the misbehavior?" And Dr. Bradbury said, "No, it really doesn't. Would you try it and let us know next week how it goes?" Well, of course, he had an opportunity during the week and came back the next week and shared, this is what had happened. His little 4-year-old starts having this temper tantrum. And the father gets down, looks and says, "I need a hug." And the little boy goes, "What?" And the father says, "I need a hug." And the little boy's going, "Now?" And the father says, "Yes, I need a hug." And the little boy goes, "Oh, all right." And he very stiffly gives his father a hug. And then after a while, they just kind of melt in each other's arms. And the father said, "Thanks, I really needed that." And the little boy said, "So did I." And there's some points I want to share with you about this story. The father didn't say, "You need a hug." The father said, "I need a hug." And I have always believed, and Adler and Drykers believe, that children innately want to contribute. They want to give. And I was just so delighted to see this experiment that they've been doing, I forget which university, where they take these little 18-month-old children into a room with their parents. And the experimenter, the researcher, has a clothesline, and he's hanging things on this clothesline. And then he purposely drops one. And can you guess what this 18-month-old child does? The 18-month-old just looks at it, and he goes over and he picks it up and he gives it to them. And I just think, because what they are showing, they have several experiments like that showing that even at this very young children see what needs to be done and they like to help. And I think that this is something that we need to nurture in children, giving them these opportunities to help and to contribute, because I do believe it's innate and it really helps them to develop the characteristics and life skills we want for them. Now, I want to share one other example that someone sent to me after hearing about hugs. Mary Wardlow said, "My daughter Marison, who is a wonderfully strong-willed 6-year-old child, didn't want to get up and get ready for school one morning." Anyone ever had that challenge? Being a strong-willed individual myself, there's a clue, I could sense a battle of wills brewing, though I was determined to avoid it. I repeatedly asked her nicely to get up and get herself ready, and I picked out her clothes so she could move a little faster. Mistake. Still, she refused to move. I reminded her still nicely that the bus would be at our house soon, and if she didn't get dressed, she was going to miss it. She sat up and looked at her clothes and screamed, "I don't want to wear that!" Her tone was so nasty that I found it hard to keep myself composed, but I went to her room and picked out 2 other outfits so she could choose which one she wanted to wear. I announced to her I laid out 3 sets of clothes. You need to pick one and get dressed. I had almost made it to the bedroom exit when she fired back, "I want 4." I was so angry at that point that what came next surprised us both. I walked over to her and said, "Madison, I'm going to pick you up, hold you, and hug you, and love you. And when I'm done, you're going to get up and choose an outfit and get dressed." When I picked her up and put my arms around her, I felt her just melt in my arms. Her attitude softened immediately, and so did mine. That moment was amazing to me. A volatile situation turned warm in a few seconds just because I chose to hug a child who was at that moment so unhuggable. At the conference, you talked about the power of a hug to calm down an out-of-control child. And I've learned firsthand that you were absolutely right. Thank you for teaching others about the power of a hug. So later, when I was talking to Mary, I talked to her about the value of letting her child pick out her own clothes the night before, which would help her to feel more capable and less rebellious in the first place. So, again, the hug is a way of creating that connection before correction. So I really suggest that when in doubt, try it. Just say, "I need a hug." One of the activities we do sometimes is we'll have several people be adults and several people be children. And the children are all having temper tantrums, and the adult's job is to go and say, "I need a hug," and then wait and see what happens. If this child still doesn't do it, ask again, ask a second time, "I need a hug," and this child still doesn't do it. The third time you say, "I need a hug, come find me when you're ready," and then just walk away. And it is so fun to watch because when they start walking away, the child will, wait, come on. So, not always. You know, nothing works all the time. And have you ever had that feeling where you just want to be left alone to have your temper tantrum? And see, sometimes we need to respect that. And again, just let children have their feelings. So, talking about misbehavior, we always need to look at, is it really misbehavior or is it just age-appropriate behavior? And I just want to talk about that because I think it's so important that children often do not understand no the way we think they do, especially toddlers. And the reason I had the artist draw this picture is because I went through it with every one of my children when they're about 18 months old to 2 years old. And have you noticed that you think they know they're not supposed to touch that. But what do? They go for it, and they're looking to see if you're coming, and they look to see if you're coming. And then they touch it. And it's not because they stay up all night trying to think about how to make you miserable. It's because they're little scientists, little explorers, and they're just testing all of this, and what fun is to do it if you don't see. So I want you to give you the 3 main tools for those of you who just have toddlers. Are you ready? Get out your pencils, your pens. This is really important stuff. Oh, wait a minute. I got to do Piaget first. You got to wait till they come. Okay. So what I have found is that it can be very helpful to help parents understand what's going on in a toddler's brain or in a small child. And when I taught child development at a community college for 10 years, and I would ask a student to bring in a 4-year-old child. And they would bring in the child, and I would say, "Okay, do these glasses have the same amount of water?" And they would agree that they did. So I said, "I want you to watch carefully what I'm going to do. I'm going to pour this one into this short, fat glass, and this one into the taller, thinner glass. Now, do they still have the same amount of water?" And what would a 4-year-old say? No. They usually think this one has more. And it's because their brain has not developed enough to what Piaget called conserve. And or this is an advanced level of cause and effect. And so sometimes we expect things of children that they're really not even capable, and that's why it just breaks my heart to see a little 2-year-old put in punitive timeout or spanked for something that they are not really capable of understanding. So here's your 3 main tools for toddlers. Supervision. 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 Throw in a little distraction, a little redirection, some hugs. I mean, there are other things to do. But the thing is that you can't say to a toddler, you cannot run into the street and expect them to understand that and to be responsible for that, no matter how many times they're spanked. So we need to teach them without expecting them to learn. You know, I remember talking to one parent who said, I have to spank my child when it's a matter of life or death. I have to spank him, for example, to teach him not to run in the street. So I said, okay, after you have spanked your child, 2 years old, not to run in the street, will you now let him play in front of a busy street unsupervised? What do they say? Well, no. I said, well, wait, what if you spank him 100 times? Now will you let him play in front of a busy street unsupervised? Well, no, of course not. And that is why they know at some level that they do not have the maturity and the judgment and the responsibility to handle that. So you still teach. When you've got a 2-year-old, you say, let's look up the street and see if a car's coming, and look this way and tell me when it's safe to go. And because eventually that will kick in. Now, one of the things I've been telling parents to help them understand this is, how long does it take a child to learn to talk? Usually at least a year, and sometimes longer. How do they learn it? Because for all that whole year, we're talking to them. Even when they can't understand it, then all of a sudden, it just makes sense to them, it kicks in. So we need to teach a lot of things without expecting them to understand until they're ready. So I would like all of you to just stand up for a minute. I want to demonstrate something to you. It's called Do As I Say. And I want you all to lift your hand, your right hand up into the air, and make a circle with your thumb and your forefinger. And then I want you to wave it this way, and wave it this way, and wave it all around. And then I'm going to have you put it on your chin. Okay, what did I say? What did I say? Put it on my chin. What did I do? Cheek. Okay, sit down. How many of you put it on your cheek? How many of you put it on your chin? Okay, so some of you are more audio learners than visual. But, and at the back, where people couldn't see very well, they probably put more of them on their chin because that's what they could hear. But what does this teach us? That children learn a lot more from what we do, what we say than what we do. Okay, so at this point, I want to demonstrate one more thing about this. Is there anyone who has a child who sometimes hits? Okay, would one of you come up here and I'll demonstrate something with you? Okay, here she comes. Okay, so here's what I'm going to suggest that you do with a child who hits. Okay, I want you to pretend you're your child. I want you to go to hit me. Touch nicely. Touch nicely. Do I try again? Touch nicely. What do you need to do?
He's touching. One hand isn't enough.
The thing
Try holding, getting on the floor, holding him, still touching.
Have you been telling him to touch nicely?
Yeah, we did that for a while.
Okay, so it doesn't work with everybody.
I was hoping for a solution today.
Well, you do, with some children, you do have to, what I would do if every time a child is hit, I would tell them to touch nicely. I did this with my 18-month-old child when she went to grandchild. And pretty soon she would look at me when she'd go to hit, and I would say, touch nicely, and then she would grin and do it. But I still had to supervise and watch closely. With a child like that, if they just keep doing it, it's often because there is too much of a power struggle going on. And so sometimes I would just leave the room if I possibly could. Immediately when she starts doing it, just leave the room and say, I'll come back as soon as you're ready to touch nicely. Let it know in advance, though. So, again, we've talked about that the primary goal is to experience a sense of belonging and significance. And when children believe they don't have that belonging and significance, they choose a mistaken goal. Belief is emphasized because it doesn't matter what you believe. It matters what the child believes. Now, I want to give you the typical example. How many of you are oldest children? Do you remember the day you were dethroned? When Mom went to the hospital and came home with a new baby. I want to share you just a few bars of a song by Wayne Frieden and Marie Hartwell Walker.
Oh, it's hard to be number one, and lately it's just no fun at all. Life was so nice when we were three, Mommy and Daddy and me. When I was the only one, everyone noticed me. They said, what a cute little baby, what a handsome child he'll be. And now there's another, and I don't like it one bit. Send it back to the hospital, and let's just forget it.
Forget about it. I cut it off too soon. Okay, so what happens when Mom brings home a new baby? The older child looks around and sees what's happening, a lot of time and attention, and often comes to a mistaken belief. This means Mommy doesn't love me anymore. Now, to emphasize this a little bit, I want to tell you the story about The Tale of a Second Mother by Ed and Barbara Jano. And they tell the story about this very happy family where the father was just this kind, hardworking, loving father, and the mom was this kind, loving mom, and they were so happy, and the child was a sweet, loving child. One day they looked at each other and said, we're so happy, why don't we have another? So the next day, the father and the child went down to the mother store and brought home a brand new mother. Now imagine you're the first mother. How do you want that second mother to be? Do you want her to be as wonderful as you are? Do you want your children to love her as much as they love you? And your husband, now be honest, how do you want her to be? Dumb, ugly, stupid, helpless, bossy, bitchy, irritating, nervous lady, and suffering from a fatal disease. Now, isn't it interesting how often we expect a child to handle a situation better than we would ourselves? So, but we need to deal with the belief and not just the behavior. Because if you're dealing just with the behavior, it's similar to if there's an arsonist who's setting fires all over town, and you keep putting out the fires, but you don't catch the arsonist. The fires won't stop until you catch the arsonist. Now, sometimes you do have to, of course, you have to put out the fires at the same time. But I want to give you an example of what one mother did because she had a child who was feeling very dethroned by a baby brother. And so she sat down with her 4-year-old and said, honey, I want to tell you a story about our family. And she got some candles out of the drunk drawer and she said, now these candles represent our family. And this is the mommy candle, this is the one for me. And this flame represents my love. And when I married your daddy, I gave him all my love. And I still have all my love left. And when you were born, I gave you all my love. And Daddy still has all my love, and I still have all my love left. And when the baby was born, I gave the baby all my love. And you still have all my love. Daddy still has all my love. And I still have all my love left. And now look at all the bright light we have in our family with all this love. And isn't that just a beautiful way of dealing with the child's belief and not just the behavior? And several people have told me about doing this example with the child. One mother said she did it with a 9-year-old who was still feeling dethroned by a 4-year-old. And that the child just got tears in her eyes as she saw this demonstration. Of course, if you have more children, you have to have more candles. We do need to really be aware of what the belief might be behind the behavior. And this demonstration was by someone sent this to me, where if you think of an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is the behavior, but the whole base of the iceberg is that need for belonging and significance. That is the gas that drives the behavior, and too often we don't pay enough attention to that. And to remember that a misbehaving child is a discouraged child. And so Visalia School District, who also, they do a lot of positive discipline, and they created this graphic that shows how important it is to have for academic achievement and belonging and significance for a climate of learning. And we really need to pay attention to both. They're equally important. So how many of you have heard some things that make sense to you? Anybody heard anything yet that makes sense? Have you ever wondered, why is it so hard? Well, it's because you have buttons. And guess who knows what they are and how to push them. And do you know what happens when your buttons get pushed? You go into your reptilian brain, and reptiles eat their young. At least we're a little above the reptiles, but we really need to understand a little bit more about the brain, and this comes from the work of Daniel Siegel and the book Parenting from the Inside Out. And just to help you understand this, I want to teach you about the brain by having everybody raise your hand like this, because we're going to use the palm of your hand as a model for the brain. And from the palm of your hand down to the wrist, that's the primitive brain, the fight, flight, freeze. Put your thumb into the palm of your hand, that is the midbrain. Again, that regulates the fight, flight, freeze, but it's also where we store a lot of those old memories of I'm not good enough, and our feelings of inadequacy and fear. Now bring the fingers down over the thumb, and now you've got the cortex. And the cortex is very complicated, but we're going to talk about the only place where thinking takes place is right here at the prefrontal cortex. And this is where you have conscience and judgment and rational thinking. And so when you get upset, do you know what happens? You flip your lid. And when you flip your lid, what is exposed? Just the midbrain, the fight, flight, freeze. And because of mirror neurons, if you flip your lid, what happens to the child? So maybe the child flips first, and then you flip back, you react instead of act. Now, is this the time to have a rational conversation where everyone's listening? No, and yet why is it that so many parents think that this is the time they need to teach their child? Because they're afraid they'll get away with something. I'm not doing my job. But it's like, with wisdom and understanding, you'll know how important it is to wait until you can calm down, until your child can calm down. And to teach children self-regulation, for one thing, we need to also have it ourselves. We need to learn to self-soothe ourselves. And we've all heard of counting to 10, taking deep breaths, waiting until we can calm down. And we also need to teach this to children, because what is the most popular discipline method used today? Time out. But it's usually the very negative kind. You go to your room and you think about what you did, which is one of the silliest things you can say, because you cannot control what the child's going to think about. In fact, what is more likely that they're not thinking about what they did. and how helpful it is to be sent to timeout. They're probably thinking about what you did, how unfair it is, how they could get even or not get caught next time. So, punitive timeout, grounding, jail in the room, again, that naughty chair that just breaks my heart when I see these little 2-year-olds being put on the naughty chair. Because what we need to do is help kids create their own positive timeout. And I'm saying don't do it for them, with them. If they're not old enough to create it, they're not old enough to use it. In fact, if they're not old enough to understand this, I don't think they're old enough to use it. I will tell you about an exception. I was giving a lecture somewhere, either in San Jose or Santa Cruz, when a woman came up to me after I had said, I don't think the kids are old enough for any kind of timeout till they're about 4. And she shared with me, she says, I use timeout with my little 18-month-old daughter. And it's because she has her silky pillow. And she'll be feeling upset, and I'll say, honey, would it help you to go lay on your silky pillow? And she says, yeah, I want my silky pillow. Or she'll say, well, do you want me to go with you? Yes, I want you to go with me. And why not? We probably need it just as much. So what we do is we sit down with our kids and we ask them, what would help you to feel better? If we were to create a positive timeout that would help you to feel better, and then, because it has a punitive reputation, let kids decide what to call it. They might call it their feel-good place, their cool-off spot, space, or sparkles. Or one school, they told me that they created a timeout grandma, and the kids could go sit on grandma's lap. And then this is the way you use positive timeout. You ask them, would it help you to go to your feel-good place? And they might say, no. And then you say, would you like me to go with you? And again, they might say no. And you say, well, okay, I think I'll go to mine because I need to calm down. So you model that. But to send them is not helpful. It's self-soothing. They need to learn to choose it themselves. And then sometimes you need to follow up. Sometimes positive timeout is enough because they just calm down, they feel better, and then they do better. But if they need to make amends or to fix whatever it is, then later, when they've calmed down, is when you can talk about that. Now, here's another tool that really helps children learn, and that is to have them create routine charts. And again, you sit down with them and you say, start with bedtime routines. And what is it that you need to do before you go to bed, and let them list it. And then one of the things that kids love is when you take pictures of them doing each task. Older kids might want to just find graphics on the internet, or they might just want to make a list, but teaching them time management. But here is one that I did with my granddaughter, and she said, well, Grandma, the last thing I do is go to sleep, so you've got to take a picture of me sleeping. They really get it. And then, once you have, here's 2 more I want to show you. The one on this side is my grandson Grayson's, and he was just so excited about creating that because he got to use the staple gun and numbers when he was learning about it. And I went up to visit, and he just says, Grandma, come see my routine chart. Now, I want to tell you about the one on the right. Someone sent that to me and shared that the 6-year-old was helping her 4-year-old brother create his routine chart. And she said it was so fun listening to them talk about it. And she says, no, none of us could read it, but they understood it. It was theirs. You can tell this is theirs. This isn't something that was created all beautifully by a parent. And the other thing is you'll notice that routine charts do not include rewards or stickers. It's to help children feel that sense of accomplishment and capability because it's theirs. And so instead of using rewards, you just ask children, what is next on your routine chart? And let them tell you. And another problem-solving tool is to use a wheel of choice. And again, you can sit down at a table and let the kids figure out what are some solutions to typical problems, whether when kids are fighting or whatever other problems are common. And then they can have a wheel of choice. And so sometimes when there's a conflict, you can ask children, what would help you the most right now? To put this on the family meeting agenda or to go to the wheel of choice? Or what would help you the most right now? Some positive time out or the wheel of choice, so that they're having these choices again. This is a school in Irvine where they have several wheels of choice posted around the playground. Now, I've been talking a lot about getting children involved. And I do believe that the more we get them involved, the more skills they're learning, the more ownership they have. But there are some times when you just have to decide what you're going to do. And what you need to do is inform in advance and then keep your mouth shut and follow through. So is there anyone here who have kids who fight in the car while you're driving? Okay, I need 2 volunteers to come on up here. 2 volunteers who want to learn about what to do when your kids fight in the back seat of the car. Okay. He needs a sibling. Okay. Okay, now, you guys, one stand on each side of me for a minute. What was there? Pamela and Timothy. Okay. So, here's the deal. I don't even need to know how your age is. I guess children. You're going to want to play children. But what I'm going to demonstrate is the inform in advance. So before we get in the car, I'm going to let you guys know that when you fight, I'm just going to pull over to the side of the road, and I'll wait till you stop fighting to drive again. And the only way I'll know you're ready is to hear it from both of you that you're ready to stop fighting. So what do you understand what I'm going to do when you fight? What am I going to do when you fight? And how will I know you're ready to go again? Not just stop. Okay, so now, here we've got the car all set up. You guys, and, who's one tonight? Okay, so, but first I'm going to do scene 1. This is what your neighbors do. Okay. You guys start fighting. Go ahead, start fighting.
Stop.
You guys stop fighting. I'm going to pull over.
Mom, he's fighting.
You guys, this is so distracting. Can't you see how dangerous this is for Okay, so now I'm going to show you what follow through looks like. Okay, let's start going again. Start fighting.
Stop it. Stop. Leave me alone.
Stop fighting the first time?
I was wrapped up in the fight.
That's what they think. But why do you all think that they kept fighting?
They got attention. Start getting attention.
Oh, you know the kids love to see you go crazy. It's like, oh my God, this is just so much fun. So why did you stop the second time?
You were ignoring us.
Exactly. It's like you cannot believe the power of just shutting your mouth and acting. Okay, let's give them a hand again. So again, that thing about shutting your mouth, you don't know, it's so disrespectful when you give children a warning. you're assuming they're stupid, that they didn't hear you in the first place. And so instead, I made sure they understood me. I told them what I was going to do. I said, what is your understanding of what I'm going to do? I knew they knew. So then my job is just to follow through. I'm going to give you another example of this in just a few minutes, but first, I want to talk about family meetings. Family meetings, in my opinion, is one of the most important things you can do. And in schools, it is class meetings. When kids are involved in family meetings, first of all, they are learning to give and receive compliments. They're learning to be good finders, to look for the good. And this is something that children need to be taught, and they need to practice at it. And it's as important as anything else they can do, to look for good and to verbalize it. And kids in school, to help them feel more that sense of belonging and significance when they're having class meetings and they start with everybody giving compliments, it is just very, very powerful. And then when kids are having a challenge, to have them put it on the class meeting agenda or the family meeting agenda, and then later going around the circle and working on solutions. So that kids are really focusing on solutions. And when they come up with the solutions and you work on them, then it's theirs, and they're more interested in following the solutions that they have helped create. And in my family, when we had regular family meetings, things went so much more smoothly. By the way, kids aren't old enough to do this till they're about 4. There's something that happens when they're 4, they're just great at it. But before that, I would either wait till the younger ones were asleep, or if they can sit and color and not demand too much attention, they can still be part of it, which would be the best, which would be preferable. But as soon as they're 4, fighting would be at least 80% less in when we would have family meetings. Now, I do want to let you know, though, kids, 4-year-olds, when you do them correctly, where they really are not just lecture platforms for parents, but where you have the agenda on, and the kids go and they brainstorm for solutions, and you pick one that works, try it and see how it works for a week. It is so effective. But when they become teenagers, all of a sudden everything is stupid, including family meetings. And I can remember Mary, who was really complaining, oh, this is so stupid, we have to have another family meeting. I said, yes, I know, we can make them shorter, but it's very important to me, so humor me. So we would still have our family meetings, and then one day, Mary stayed overnight with a friend. And she came home the next day and said, that family is so screwed up. They should be having family meetings. And then when she got off to college and was having family meetings with her roommates. But kids are learning so much when they do this on a regular basis. But one of the things you have to teach is that we're not looking for blame, we're looking for solutions. And so one day I come home and I said, who left their dishes in the sink? And Mark says, are you looking for blame or are you looking for solutions? Okay. You teach these things to kids, and boy, do they use them with you. So I said, okay, well, let's just put it on the family meeting agenda. Of course, nobody would say they did it, so we put nobody's dishes on the family meeting agenda. And the kids came up with a great solution. They said, well, take turns. We'll just take turns doing one night a week for nobody's dishes. Well, it's amazing how fewer nobody's dishes there were after they had come to that. Now, I want to talk to you for a minute about praise versus encouragement. First of all, I didn't talk enough about rewards and why we don't advocate rewards. We want kids to do things, the right thing, because it feels good inside. And when you give rewards, you take away from that good feeling so that all they focus on is the reward. And the thing about praise is that you really can't give children self-esteem. We keep thinking we can give it to them. We can't. We can only help them develop it. And to show you the difference between praise and encouragement, again, I need 2 volunteers to come up here. One is going to receive praise and one is going to receive encouragement. 2 volunteers. I really appreciate you guys coming up so quickly when I ask for volunteers. Okay. So one of you on this side. Okay, so I want all of you to also pretend that you're in their shoes and notice what would be more motivating to you. Okay, so all A's, I want you to hold it like this. All A's, I'm going to give you a big reward. You worked hard. You deserve it. I am so proud of you. You must be so proud of yourself. I'm glad you listened to me. How do you feel about it? I like what you did. You figured it out for yourself. You did it just like I told you. I trust your judgment. You really know how to please me. You can decide what is best for you. Great, that's what I expected. I have faith in you to learn from your mistakes. You are such a good girl. I love you no matter what. Okay, so, how many of you would rather have these statements? Come on, we've got to have some approval junkies. Approval junkies love this. How many of you would rather have these statements? Why? Okay, let me ask you. Do you like yours or would you rather have hers?
Well, at some point I started feeling manipulated. Like when you start saying, you did it just like I told you. I'm like, well, I wonder what I want to do at this point.
Okay, but did you like these better or would you rather have hers?
Hers, I think.
Chicken givers.
The point is that a lot of people like praise. It's sort of like candy. You know, a little bit can go a long way, and if you get too much, you get addicted. And you do become approval junkies. And I'm not saying that kids like rewards too, but then they start depending on them and demanding them, and they want bigger and bigger rewards. It takes away from that feeling. And so the same thing here, this is drawing forth from her, helping her to self-evaluate. This is all her pleasing me, depending on me for evaluation of who she is. So this is what we want to do, is use encouragement that helps her to feel from that inner locus of control. Okay, thank you very much. Give them a hand. Okay, I've got 2 more fun demonstrations, and for this one, any of you have children who back talk? Okay, we're going to learn about how to do about back talking. So, again, I need 3 volunteers. 3 volunteers quickly. You getting tired? If you're tired, get up. So, which one of you wants to be the child? Okay, so you grab the microphone, and would you come over here? So you're going to be parent B, you're parent A, and again, you'll walk over to her, hold the microphone, and just listen to what she says, notice what you're thinking, feeling, deciding. Then you'll over here and listen to one, and you're going to go back and forth, just noticing what you're thinking, feeling, and deciding. So.
Don't talk to me that way, young man.
Wait a minute, say it louder.
Don't talk to me that way, young man.
Is this mic on?
Is it on?
No.
Might be something.
See if there's a red light on it.
Does it say? Can you just talk real loud?
Oh, okay. Don't talk to me that way, young man.
I have all the quiet lines. I wonder what I did to upset you.
You can't be
so much.
sarcastic.
I wonder what I did to upset you so much.
Go to your room and don't come out until you can be respectful.
Wow. You are really angry.
Yeah.
You're grounded for a week.
I need to take some time out until I can be with you respectfully.
How can you talk to me that way after all I have done for you?
What would help us right now? Some time apart from each other, or maybe putting this on the family meeting?
You just lost all your privileges.
I can hear that you're really angry right now. Do you want to tell me more about it?
Maybe military school will teach you.
I need a hug. Please come find me when you feel like it.
How far do you think that smart mouth is going to take you? You will be respectful if I have to beat it into you.
You know that I really love you.
Okay, now, let me just ask you, when you go to this pair, what do you think he feeling decided?
Well, I tend to gravitate more in this direction. Yeah.
Okay. Because which one is likely to make you think about not back talking?
Daddy.
Okay. Can you all see that what this parent is doing is back talking back? And so modeling the opposite of what she's trying to teach. And even though some people would say, oh, that's being too soft, what this one is doing is showing understanding, is controlling his own behavior, is acting instead of reacting, which is drawing forth much more feelings of cooperation and probably even maybe a little guilt about back talking yourself. Because so often we model the opposite of what we're trying to teach. Okay, so let's give them a hand. You know, I used to teach about logical consequences and found that so often people misused them. So I came up with the 3 R's of logical consequences that need to be related, respectful, and reasonable. Still, I found that they were misused, and that's why I started saying no more logical consequences, at least hardly ever, because there are still times when they are appropriate. But instead, focus on solutions. And that is one of the primary themes of positive discipline, is always what is the problem and what is the solution? And how can I get kids involved in helping to find the solutions, whatever way we do it, so that they're learning. Now I want to do one more demonstration. You know, I've done a lot with younger children. Now I want somebody who will play a teenager, who, so I can teach about the 4 steps for follow through with teenagers. So would somebody be willing to come up and be a teenager? We're going to go through these. I'm just going to talk you through these steps. Here's the 4 steps for follow through. First of all, you have a friendly discussion where everyone gets to voice his or feelings around the issue. Now the issue is mowing the lawn, where you have said you will, but then you just don't. So we have brainstormed solutions, and what we have agreed on is that you will do it. And we at first talked about when, because I wanted it done on the weekend before we have barbecues. You wanted to be able to do it, but finally you agreed that you would do it by 12 o'clock on Saturdays. And it was a mutual agreement. So we did agree on a specific time to a deadline to the minute. Then understand, get this part, understand children well enough to know that the deadline probably won't be met, and simply follow through with your part of the agreement by holding them accountable. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. What I want you to do is sit in this chair, and you're playing video games, and it is noon. It's 12 o'clock on Saturday. There you go. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
It's 12 o'clock. What was our agreement?
What agreement? weeding the lawn? Well, can I finish this game first? Because I'd really like to. It'll only take a minute. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I know what you're all thinking. My kid wouldn't agree that quickly. But I want to show you why she did. First of all, the steps that defeat follow through is wanting teens to have the same priorities you do. As a teenager, how high on your priority list is mowing the lawn? Where is it even on there? No. So getting into judgments instead of sticking to the issue. Did you feel that I judged you or criticized you?
No.
But I stuck to the issue?
Mm-hmm.
Not getting into agreements in advance that includes a specific time. How important was it to you that you knew we had agreed on a specific time?
It was important enough that it was like, well, I don't really want to do it, but we had agreed, so I kind of felt forced into it.
Okay. Not maintaining dignity and respect for the teen and yourself. Was there any time that you felt I did not maintain respect for you?
No.
And for myself, and for what needed to be done. Okay, so now let me show you the last one. The 4 hints for effective follow-through. First of all, keep comments simple and concise. I noticed you didn't mow the lawn. Please do that now. I didn't even say that. I just said, what was our agreement? Because you knew. And then in response, what was your agreement? And then in response to further objections, what did I do? I kept my mouth shut, used nonverbal. See, and how much more important was that I just...
Oh yeah, that was very forceful.
I want to tell you about something about, especially teenagers. If you start lecturing and arguing about why they should do something, they're smarter than you. They can out-argue you. They can give you a better argument for why they shouldn't do it than you can ever give them for why they should. And this is one reason why you just shut your mouth, and I'm holding her accountable, but I'm doing it respectfully, and I'm just keeping my mouth shut. And when the child concedes, keep the agreement. Sometimes obviously a noise saying, you're so tight. Well, then you just say thank you for keeping our agreement. Okay, let's give her a hand. One of the things about positive discipline that is so important is to remember that mistakes are wonderful opportunities to learn. Because none of us are perfect. We're all going to flip our lids. And it's not a time to beat up on ourselves. It's like what we can do is use the 4 R's of recovery from mistakes, where we just recognize, gee, I made a mistake. You take responsibility for it. You reconcile, which means you need to say you're sorry. Now, how many of you have ever said you're sorry to a child? What do they say? That's okay, Mom. That's okay, Dad. That's okay, teacher. Then you've created the connection, and you can go on and resolve, work on a solution together. Now, I want to tell you my signature story. One day, I was really upset at Mary. I don't even remember what it was for, but I really lost it. And I said, Mary, you are a spoiled brat. And she looked at me and said, well, don't tell me later that you're sorry, because she's used to this. I was so upset. I said, you don't have to worry, because I'm not. Now, do any of you ever lose it that badly, or am I the only one? So she storms off to her bedroom, and she slams the door. And then I calmed down. I think, oh, my goodness. I didn't practice what I preached. I better go tell her I'm sorry. So I go into her bedroom to apologize. But she's not ready for an apology. She's very busy. She has her copy of Positive Discipline. And a big black marking pen. And I just kind of snuck out of there thinking, oh dear, we're going to have another Mommy Dearest book hit the market. But it wasn't 5 minutes before she came out to me and said, Mommy, I'm so sorry. And I said, honey, I'm sorry. When I called you a spoiled brat, I was being one. I was upset at you for losing control of your behavior, and I had totally lost control of my own. I'm so sorry. She said, that's okay, Mom, I really was being a spoiled brat. I said, yes, honey, but I can see what I did to provoke you to act that way. She said, yes, Mom, but I can see what I did. If you want your children to be responsible and be accountable, take responsibility for what your part is in creating some of the things that you complain about. It's one of the best models that you can give to your children. And Lastly, a couple of cartoons where Dennis says, do I have to do all the playing around here? And I think that sometimes in our speeded up life we forget to just have fun with our kids and plan these fun things. And another one, whenever my mom thinks I need a good talking to, Mrs. Wilson says I need a hug. And lastly, I just love what Toni Morrison said when she said, do your eyes light up when they walk into the room? And I think that that's, if we just really make that effort to let the kids know by our energy and by our eyes how important they are to us, it will make such a difference. And before I end, I just want to say that I hope that you will all take a parenting class because they are so much fun. And there are so many being taught in San Jose now. That is just one of the hot spots for positive discipline. And I know that Becky will tell you more about that, because when you're involved on an ongoing basis and you give this kind of support for that it's okay to make mistakes and to learn all these tools, because I could only give you a few tonight. And so thank you so much for letting me be here.